Good morning. This is group 3, and we are covering chapter 9, compensation and rewards this morning. I am Dustin Nielsen, and I'm going to start with objective 1, examine sound compensation plans. We begin with externally competitive salaries, which are compensation plans help districts recruit and retain qualified staff. And overall, our budget is spent 60 to 85% of it is on personnel. So recruiting and hiring the best staff is best for our districts, obviously. And salaries most often hold the most interest for those prospective employees, but also the benefits such as sick leave, retirement benefits, and such also play a role. But salary is the main carrot that people look at as they're looking at school districts. Competitors, many organizations are looking for similar skilled personnel, and salaries can be across the board increases or targeted individual subgroups. So as your pay scale is adjusted, you may look at the upper end of the scale, you may look at just the starting salary, or some districts add steps to their salary schedule to help with retaining staff and make it more appealing to keep staff. Increasing salaries to be more competitive can be expensive, though, depending on your size of your district. If you have a really large district, just a 1% increase can cost a lot of money and add a lot to your budget. So something to consider as you increase your salary schedules each year. Cost of increases, again, just mentioned schools are usually competitive at the low end of the salary schedule, but at the high end, they may not be as comparable. And then other factors teachers consider when leaving are ties from the community, and then retirement benefits and other informal benefits that come with being out of district for a certain amount of time and so forth. Continuing with objective 1 here. We have number 4, they're internally competitive salaries. Salaries for different positions reflect the level of responsibility and expertise required. For example, teacher salary compared to a principal salary is different. A large school compared to a small school principal is going to be a little bit different as well. They name some others in the chapter as well, but those are a couple of obvious ones. The information in the book here comparing salaries is a little bit dated, but top 10 salaries in 2004 between 66 and 71,000, and the bottom 10 salaries were between 27 and 31,000. So large disparity between those. And on page 168, so I want to list them all out, but there's a whole bunch of different websites you can go to compare different salaries, teacher salaries and such across the US. Teachers were near the low end of the income distribution among professionals, also a chart there. And again, teachers are towards the bottom of the list of professionals in terms of their pay. And lastly, we'll cover here second jobs. It's estimated that 4% of teachers hold second jobs. And during the school year, that means they get about $2,400 from that job, or if they have a summer job, making about that much with $2,300. The need for that sometimes is just the cost of living, rural and urban settings, and also housing prices are very much different depending on where around the nation and so forth there. So a lot of times the need is just for the covered cost of living, such as housing. And that wraps up objective 1.
I don't know if you guys all know off the top of your head, but I just think it's interesting. I know our starting is like 39,000 and we're in 2023. So if you look at in 2004, almost 20 years, and it really hasn't increased that much in starting salaries.
We in the book there talked about that as well, hearing about had a 10-year gap, and it only went up a little percentage, and some districts didn't go up in that 10 years and so forth. So it's been a struggle.
OPS, I don't know if you've heard, but OPS is gonna try and raise their salary schedule by 12% over the next 4 years.
Wow.
It's gonna be huge, a lot of money, but I think they're really struggling to find teachers, and like everyone is, and I'm sure that's probably the impetus for it. That's gonna be a major breakthrough for a lot of a lot of schools, when they see that, at least in this metro area, other
Absolutely.
surrounding districts are going to have to do something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of good to hear, but that actually is a good kind of segue into objective number 2. I'm Kate Chrisman, and I'm going to cover objectives 2 and 3. Objective 2 is examining reasons for low salaries in the profession. So just starting off looking at daily wages, teachers work fewer hours per year than other professionals, and that's kind of the argument as to why the annual salary is lower, but that can be a little misleading. Teachers argue, and I don't know that anyone could really disagree, that when you consider the hours they put in outside of contracted days, they work more than what is documented. In the book, they compared daily wages. It was a little more accurate compared to the annual. So teachers on average make about 225 a day, where they compared it to an architect, and he's making, or he or she, that person's making 280 daily. So still a pretty significant difference, even when you look at the days that they put in. So then the next point kind of is salary equity. Salaries should obviously be competitive, but they need to be equitable. So people with similar qualifications working under the same conditions should be paid the same. That's the idea of equity. It can be difficult to measure sometimes equity because people's perceptions of fairness can be different. So what a teacher does during the day or after school or whenever, the work they do is different than what a business professional might feel they are doing. So it's hard to kind of find that equity in the professional world. We also look at reasons for low salaries in the Equal Pay Act. So basically that if you don't have equal pay, it's a big problem for morale. It also could be illegal because of the Equal Pay Act. So the Equal Pay Act was in 1963, and it required employers to pay men and women doing the same job equally. There is not so much of a gender issue anymore when it comes to the discrepancies, but basically occupations dominated by females, like teaching and nursing, are lower. They are paid lower than the male occupations that they reference, like your more hands-on type of thing. And then finally, weighted student funding. This refers to the way money is allocated in the schools. The book referenced an article from 2006 is saying that schools were looking at going to this, but I did some additional research, and most states and districts follow this or a similar model. Basically, schools with high numbers of students that come from low income or have disabilities or limited English proficiency, those schools receive more money in the budget to help in any way that they need. And then there's one more kind of point to objective 2, again, looking at reasons for low salaries in the profession. And that's regarding fringe benefits. So if you think about salary, it's really only part of a teacher's total compensation package. You got health insurance, you have retirement contributions, and the book talks about 3 different types of benefits. There's the collateral, obviously payment received without additional effort. So sick leave, insurance, retirement is all collateral. Non-salary, and this is duties performed outside of normal teacher responsibilities. I can tell you in a small school like Cedar Bluffs, almost every teacher has an extra duty that they get a little bit of money for, between coaching, even doing advising, even riding a bus or driving a van for transportation, after school program. There's just a lot of what they consider non-salary benefits. And then there is the non-economic benefit, which is any feature that does not include money. Some of the things the book referenced were summers off, or just the idea that teachers get to influence the future citizens of the world, which is a non-economic benefit. It is important to remember that fringe benefits are costly to the school's budget. They cost school districts about 26% of an employee's salary on average. And we looked at other companies providing fringe benefits, and they maybe cover about 17% of the salary. So there's definitely a difference in the benefits there. And then there was a small mention of the concern that pension programs for teachers, that the money is running out when it comes to that. So it didn't talk a lot about it, but I thought it was interesting and definitely worth mentioning. Before I move on to objective 3, you guys have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems lately, whether it's my conversations with new teachers or my conversations with, former students that are, looking into getting into education, the first thing they always bring up is the starting salary. And it seems like I spend the majority of my time talking about point number 3 with the fringe benefits.
Yeah.
And personally, as I reflect on my own teaching career, those were really enjoyable, so I don't feel like I'm like blowing smoke. I think fringe benefits do play a key role. I think fringe benefits make, the teaching profession way more enjoyable, than just, going to school at, 7:45, 8 o'clock teaching and leaving at 4 o'clock. I think everyone in here would agree that, the impact on kids and the impact on your own life, using those fringe benefits does play a key role. Now, obviously, people need to make ends meet, with their salary and everything. So, that's always going to be a key talking point. But as a recruiter now in this role, I do spend a lot of time talking about the benefits of fringe, those fringe benefits.
Sure. And actually, yeah, go ahead, Troy.
I wonder, if this author was writing it now, how they would see these retention bonuses that districts are starting to hand out, and what impact is it actually having? I know they're fairly new, but I think it seems like it would be something that would help attract and keep and retain folks. But I know, at least in our area, the metro area, these retention bonuses are starting to grow quite a bit.
For sure.
And I don't know what you're seeing in your areas, but those would seem to be some huge benefits for employees.
Definitely. And, it's interesting, again, thank you, because you guys are leading me into kind of some talking points of objective 3. The single salary schedule, and then motivating employees. So essentially money is a motivator. I mean, obviously there are others and they are important, but backing up a little bit. So the single salary schedule was proposed in the early 1920s. It was proposed as a way to remove teaching jobs from politics. And teachers supported it because they felt it would professionalize their career. They also thought it would make pay more equitable across genders and grade levels, and that salaries would be based on objective criteria rather than gender or anything like that. It was criticized a little bit because critics felt that it ignored supply and demand, and they felt it might allow admin to avoid evaluating for salary purposes. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Typically, the schedule does provide larger increases to less experienced teachers. And the book mentioned that teachers reach their peak of their earning power within 15 years of entering the field. And I think if you look at most salary schedules, you are going to see probably at 20 years, you're capped out. Where do you go from there? Obviously, now we look at additional education, but with years of experience, there was a lot of conversation in the book about, while it makes sense to give incentives to younger teachers because they're the ones leaving, at what point are you going to lose the experienced teachers, or what is the turning point for a teacher to not produce, not give their all if they've been teaching for a certain number of years? So again, just kind of looking at the history of how that single salary schedule worked and then how it impacts motivating. So if you think about the single salary schedule, it actually lacks a lot of motivational power. None of the 3 theories that our group talked about in chapter 5, that equity, expectancy, and goal setting, none of that really applies to the single salary schedule. It doesn't motivate teachers to work harder or longer. There is some equity in it because everybody's getting to move up that schedule the same way. But it doesn't help teachers with that goal. There is no work harder, pay more type of feeling when it comes to the salary schedule. And then again, coming back to that retention bonus, Troy, like you were talking about, no one wants teachers to only be motivated by money. You wouldn't have probably every quality teacher at that point, because they'd just be working for the paycheck, right? But money is a motivator, so you kind of have to find a balance. The book also talks about, and I think it's really important, and again, Troy, you probably might have more to add to this, but in individuals who are teaching in a more difficult district, maybe they have lower income, maybe there is safety concerns, but do they deserve to get paid more? And what does that look like? How would that really balance out? And again, the salary schedule just doesn't open up to those conversations because it is so objective. I mean, here it is, this is what you get. So yeah, it's interesting where we'll go from here, and if the single salary schedule will remain the same as it is, or if it will change.
So one of the things that I think about as you've been going through this is, as we try to recruit more teachers, we're not just competing with other school districts, we're competing with other, sectors of employment, whether it be the tech industry or ag or manufacturing, whatever it might be. And, I think of other colleagues or even friends of mine that have held positions where they have taken less money to work at a place that offers these fringe benefits, right? How do I feel at work? Do I enjoy going to work every day? What do we do at our workplace? And so, it's tough to put a monetary value on those things. However, maybe it's a millennial point of view, but it's more so, how do I feel going to work every day? How am I treated at work every day? Do I enjoy my experience versus how much am I just getting paid? Maybe you're getting paid a lot, but you're miserable every day. And so I think there's a lot of great selling points when it comes to education. It's just, how do you bring those up as you are recruiting potential employees?
And also they talked about retention bonuses, but also, it's like sign-on bonuses, I guess. I think it's South Sioux City is, sign in, I think it's like $5,000 to start there and so forth. And kind of go back to your earlier point there about fringe benefits. I know, some districts I've been at, they've done the early retirement because they've had a lot of older teachers and so forth, and trying to help their budget by hiring, fresh out of college teachers and so forth. They're helping with the budget. And, I know schools have to do that and so forth, but, there's pros and cons to doing that, and especially with, the teacher shortage and such. What that will look like moving forward, and it will be interesting.
Okay, moving right along then.
Perfect. All right. My name is Mike Ziola, and I will be covering Objective 4, analyzing different forms of incentive pay. A couple things that we've talked about leading into this would be pay for performance. And so a couple of the main talking points that it had in that section were, how are teachers going to be paid based off their performance, and who's going to evaluate that performance? And so there were some initial trust issues with trusting the principal's evaluation. So I put some question marks by it, as that was how the teachers were feeling that the book talked about. Many teachers' perceptions were that the principal was going to reward their friends and penalize enemies. However, this was kind of interesting. The study found that the principals were able to correctly identify teachers whose students gained and those who did not. And so one of the things that came to mind as I was reading this was, although I may not know anything about chemistry, when I walk into a chemistry classroom, I know what good teaching looks like and what good teaching does not look like. And so you could use that example in any form, in any classroom that you might be covering. Some of the new strategies that they talked about as far as pay for performance was use several data sources. So you're not just using one principal's evaluation. notify the public early about expected costs and ask for voters to approve tax increases. So I thought about today's political climate. It's really difficult to pass bonds or to ask for funding when it comes to public schools. However, I feel like it would be a more doable task if it were promoting teacher pay. I feel like publicly saying these are the goals that we're looking for to incentivize our teachers, and the teachers will be receiving the money. I feel like that would go over well publicly. It also talked about teachers, and this made sense. Teachers would rather collaborate with each other than to compete with one another. So work as departments, work as a building. The pros and cons of that is it's kind of a reward system for everybody. But as you guys probably know and have seen, there may be teachers that wouldn't necessarily be pulling their weight in a situation like this and then would be receiving the benefits from others doing more. And so that's kind of what that led to there at the end. Teachers are unlikely to put forward extra effort for meaningless rewards. Incentives need to be significant. So in previous slides, we just talked about what are those signing bonuses? Are they enough to be meaningful, or those retention bonuses? Are they enough to keep teachers incentivized, excited about the career path that they're in, and those types of things?
That quote kind of reminds me of kind of a running joke of a Jeans Day coupon. Will your Jeans Day coupon pay my rent?
Exactly.
That's what I was thinking of.
The funny thing about that is so I've worked in 3 different school districts now, and at every single welcome back seminar that we have, the question about will we have Jeans Day gets brought up to the superintendent.
Of course.
Every time. Section 2, I'll kind of breeze through this, but it really just talked about other large school districts that have done incentivized plans. It didn't really get into were they successful or not. And obviously this was, 15 to 20 years ago. So things have changed just a little bit. But Denver did things like salary increases by reaching benchmarks. Douglas County incentive plan, I believe this was in Colorado as well. Increase the salary for meeting certain teacher benchmarks. So not only were these student benchmarks, but I think they were staff benchmarks as well. One thing I thought about was just kind of, continuing your education. I didn't know if that meant those benchmarks as well, like what we have in Nebraska, working towards a master's degree or whatnot. And then Houston did kind of a one-time bonus for teachers that were able to demonstrate that their students showed above average gains on assessments. And then going to the next part, career plans. This would be kind of allowing teachers to continually grow through the profession and increasing their responsibility as they do. So as thinking about, some districts in Nebraska might do like a coach or a department head, things like that, where maybe it leads to more of a stipend, a growth in salary, but then also gives that teacher some responsibility as they might be going into more of a leadership role or just helping them take more ownership of their content area in their department.
Kind of like the concept of a career plan. Just as I work as a career academy director, I obviously do this for students. We talk about where they are and where they want to be. I know a lot, we set goals for teachers, but I don't know that there's always a career plan. So it's kind of an interesting concept.
Yeah, I know LPS does a nice job of kind of, working through taking those steps, maybe not necessarily as the book talked about, but LPS does, they like to promote within. And so they really work on things that I would say are similar to a career plan, but similar to what the book talked about.
Awesome.
Listening to some of this, I've worked both public and private, about 10 in each, but just a difference in what little we have to do in a private situation to provide some incentives and some additional money and lunches and things that just kind of build morale is just so noticeable. For example, We pay teachers to do lunch duty. So they get $30 an hour if they decide they want to do lunch on top of their salary. We pay $6,000 a year toward higher education if they want to go back, and as long as it's in a profession, as long as it's in an area that's going to help them become better teachers. So we pay $3,000 a semester if you decide you want to go back to enhance your ability to teach or move up the ladder in the educational field. So it's just such a stark difference on some of the things that we can do and how I think it kind of boosts morale. So I'm Troy Wharton. I'm the Director for Student Affairs at Boys Town, and I have objectives 5 and 6. Examine the need to contain costs. The first part of that, these are pages 177 through 179 that I'll be talking about. And one of the things that they talk a little bit about is just making sure that the compensation plan, has to be monitored to make sure you're legally in compliance and that you're getting the maximum benefit for students. And then right into that, it talks a little bit about salary and overtime and what that means in a school setting. Those who are certified employees are not eligible for overtime, and that would be your school psychs, your teachers, those salaried positions. Doesn't mean they can't get additional compensation. It's just not overtime or work. Non-certified employees, all of those employees who are working hourly, once they've reached 40 hours, they are eligible for overtime if they go beyond the 40 hours. And those regulations are issued by the Department of Labor. And then we move into the administrative salaries. There's not a ton in the book about it, but there is a table on page 178 that you can refer to. It's from 2003 to 2004, and it just kind of gives a national average of what people were making at that time. There's also, if within the state of Nebraska, I know you can reach out to the State Department and you can get those if you'd like to see it, because it is public information. We next discuss the steps in constructing a salary schedule. This is a pretty complicated thing to construct one from scratch. I was able last year, before Dr. Reznicek, who was our last superintendent, one of the things he did a year and a half ago was built a new salary schedule. So I got an opportunity to kind of sit in and see some of that, but ultimately there's a lot of things involved. You do have to have some outside help. There's some firms that specialize in employee compensation that help provide those. Some of the things that are necessary, you have to make sure that is data driven. You have to know kind of what your grades and range or levels that you want to have included. Many of them typically go up to steps 10 to about 15. And again, all that is going to be based on the differences in experiences and education levels that are attained by faculty and staff in your district. And the way that these are constructed, you have to do a ton of evaluations. There's 5 steps that the book mentions. First, you've got to choose the factors that you're going to evaluate. So, for example, many of the jobs that are required in higher education, they receive higher salaries. So from that, what are the degrees that are needed? What are you going up to a PhD? Are you going up to a master's plus? So you got to start collecting some of that data. And in order to do that, you start looking for information on your job descriptions, some of your observations, what's entailed in those. Once you've collected that data, you've got to rate the criteria. And then once you've rated the criteria, you begin to take those totals and add those totals up. And then you begin to rank your positions. And once you've ranked your positions, you want to start assigning point values to them. And once you've added up your sum, then you start assigning the salaries to the key positions. And it's almost as if it's backwards mapping. So you get your higher salaries put in first, and then you start working backwards to determine what other positions should or should not, where they should land on the salary scale. Like I said earlier, we did one, and we had to collect data from other districts around. We got to see some of what they had done, but it was just a really interesting deal because there's so many folks in a room that are trying to figure out what should be the highest salary, what shouldn't be, and how do we front load it? Do teachers earn more money as they grow quicker? And one of the things we noticed about OPS is they had a ton of front loaded money, and then as teachers stayed within the district, they didn't grow very quickly. So what we tried to do with ours was give a lot of money to attract, and then as we grew, when we got to like year 5 or 6, I believe it was, that we were kind of surpassing OPS as long as teachers decided that they were going to continue to do some higher education. But the big takeaways from this section, you have to internally be consistent with your schedule, and externally it has to be competitive. The evaluation process on your salary schedule should take place every 10 years. And jobs, and for that reason, it needs to be evaluated because jobs may change. You might have some new specialties. Positions may move up or down on the salary scale based on internal competitiveness and what may be required.
Yeah, that's a complicated one for sure. But I don't know. Troy, I'm curious, when your super that you talked about had redid that whole, had a new salary schedule, was there much pushback, or were people wanting that?
So the way it works here, at the time, we didn't have a school board. We just got our first school board this year, and it was essentially our youth care provider and our superintendent. They were the school board. So they made a decision because we were having trouble getting people to apply. I think a lot of it is people don't, I mean, they know the name Boys Town, but they don't truly know what happens on the campus. So I don't think we get a ton of applicants because of that. And that's one of the things that we wanted to do, was be competitive with our salary, be competitive with some of the benefits, like paying for education. So we take all that into account. But there was very little pushback because it was the two of us and then the folks that they brought in to help us, put it together. So to your, no, not, I mean, it was needed, and the folks that were involved, I wasn't involved in the actual decision, but once they started putting it together, I was able to sit in and see some of the process. So
good experience.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have anything else to add for chapter 9? Okay. This sounds good. Thank you.